değerli katkılarından ötürü. Şimdi evet, Londra'dan bir misafirimiz var. New London Architecture ve World Search Communications'ın yönetim kurulu başkanı. Kendisi bir mimar, bir Londra gurusu, bir bisiklet aktivisti ve Londra Belediyesi'nin de danışmanlarından birisi. Dolayısıyla İstanbul ve Londra özelinde birbirinden neler öğrenebilir dediği iki şehri karşılaştıracak bir uzmanı sahneye davet etmek istiyorum. Peter Murray 1944 doğumlu ve Architectural Association'da eğitim görmüş bir mimar. Building Design, Riba Journal, Blueprint Magazine gibi dergilerin editörlüğünü yaptı. The Saga of Sydney Opera House ve Architecture and Commerce kitaplarının da yazarı. Önemli bir dipnot, özellikle mimarlarımız için, Londra Mimarlık Festivali'nin de kurucusudur kendisi aynı zamanda. Ben sözü daha fazla uzatmadan İstanbul ve Londra, pragmatik planlama, birbirinden neler öğrenebilir başlıklı sunumu için Peter'ı sahneye davet etmek istiyorum.
Thank you. Good morning, and I'm very pleased to be here in this wonderful city, and I wanted to talk about some of the issues which I think are comparable between our two cities, but also some of the things that London is doing to make itself more sustainable. And I thought I'd start by just explaining a little bit about New London Architecture, which is a centre for debate and discussion about what's happening to the built environment in London. And here you can see this is a model of the centre of the city, where we show what's happening in terms of new projects that are going to happen. And we are actually located in the building centre in London, so we're in a very similar situation as we are here today. Now, on our model, we can see all the new buildings which are being proposed and recent buildings that have just been built. And this is a part of, as the theme of today is about transparency, we are also about the transparency of decision making in London and how the city is changing, and also how we can involve the professions and the general public in that debate. Now, one of the interesting things about London and Istanbul is their richness and their history, and how that impacts on their contemporary planning. This is an image of London as it was 2,000 years ago when the Romans built the first plan. It was built on the River Thames because this was the easiest place for them to cross the river. And as you can see, they developed it with their conventional grid plan, which was the first settlement in this part of Britain. And so when we're developing anything in London, we have to deal with an overlay of plans. We have the Roman plan here, but also underneath you can just see traces of other plans which were developed as the years went by. So we went forward to the medieval period. So here you see the city as it was in the 15th century. The Roman plan still exists in some of these streets, but most of it is overlaid with smaller development plots. And also we have rivers which today are covered up, but nevertheless form a key part of the DNA of the city and have an impact on its plan. So traditionally, London was a city with spires, today it has towers, but then they were spires of churches. But nevertheless, it reflects a very different sort of skyline than you see in many more formal plans. Then in 1666, the main central area of London was burnt to the ground. It was a disaster created by the fact that most of the buildings were then built of timber, and so that when it was rebuilt out of brick which became a standard building material for many of the domestic buildings of London following the fire. But the reason why I've called this a pragmatic approach to planning, because it is very different in London to the more formal plans of cities like Paris or Berlin or Moscow or even New York, where you can see this is a plan which was developed immediately after the fire of London by Sir Christopher Wren, who was our most famous architect at the time. And he, with the king, wanted to develop this much more European type of plan with formal vistas, straight avenues, and a grand plan and a vision which was very different to the plan of London which had existed before the fire. However, all the traders who worked in the city at the time didn't want to wait for 10 years for a new master plan to be created. They wanted to get back to business straight away, because London has always been a city which is based on commerce rather than on governance, and the businesses wanted to go back to their existing plots of land, rebuild their business after the fire, and continue with their operations. So instead of building a grand plan like this, London, even today, the centre of London is based on a medieval street pattern which has a real determination of how the city itself is redeveloped even today. So this was the form of the city after the fire. You can see very complex informal plan, like Istanbul, cut through with a river, the water a key part of the trade of the city, and also a key element in terms of its built form. So this was a view by Canaletto in 1745. Again, we have religious buildings dominating the skyline, and this great trading route running through the centre of the city. So if we move to the current day, you can see that there are some similarities in the way that the scale of the population of the main southeast area of London is not the whole population, not too different to the Istanbul province. But one of the key things which we need to learn how to do in London is to be more dense. As you can see, Istanbul is far more dense, with 68,000 people per square kilometre, whereas London in the centre, in its peak, only has 17,000. Now this is a key issue for us in London, because London is growing as a city. At the moment we have a population of about 8.3 million, and by 2030 we're expecting that to be 10 million. Which means we need to build somewhere around 40 to 50,000 new homes each year, plus all the infrastructure and all the other amenities that go with that. So we need to become more dense in London. We don't want to do what happened in the post-war period, when increases in housing provision were delivered by creating new towns out in the green areas outside the city. The London plan, which is written by the mayor and is the determination of what happens in London up until 2030, or now moving forward to 2036, that says that we need to be more dense in order to be more sustainable. We follow the pattern of cities like Hong Kong. Hong Kong, one of the most dense cities in the world, but also with the least CO2 emissions created by transportation into the centre. So following a plan by Lord Richard Rogers, where he created a plan based on the idea of a more compact city, since the year 2000, London has been attempting to densify its areas in order to create a more sustainable city. Because we have some catching up to do. Indeed, looking at Istanbul is doing much better than London. London is here with its carbon emissions, much better than America and New York, but nevertheless we have some way to go to improve what we're doing. And the plan in terms of creating a sustainable city is not just about reducing energy and CO2 emissions, but it's also creating a better city, a city where people want to live, a city that is easy to get around, a safe and inclusive city, a healthy, active and a green city, and a city that is dense in the centre and is vibrant and active, something that density brings in contrast to London's suburban areas around here, which are very low density. There are often suggestions that they are made more dense, but they also are the home of people who do not want any development in their backyard. So looking at the London plan in general in terms of its ecological aspirations, we plan to reduce CO2 emissions to 60% of our emissions in 1990 by 2025, manage our waste within London by 2026. At the moment, we take a lot to fill sites outside the city itself. All new developments have to allow for sustainable urban drainage. And at the moment, one of the major infrastructure projects which is going ahead is building a tunnel underneath the Thames to take away wastewater. At the moment, during times of major storms, we mix foul water and storm water, and if there's too much of that, it overflows into the River Thames and therefore pollutes it. In order to reduce that issue, we're now building a new huge drain that goes down under the River Thames to take the wastewater away. And we have a government target of 15% of renewable energy from wind or solar energy by 2020. But one of our key issues is, of course, that 80% of our building stock will still be in existence. That is there now. It will still be in existence in 2050. So we also have a major program to improve the efficiency of existing buildings. And particularly in private residential, that's proving very difficult to convince people to bring their homes up to standard. So how is London creating more dense neighbourhoods? And the main programme is what the Mayor calls opportunity areas. These are 43 different locations in London. The centre of London is just here, so this is mainly suburban areas. This is the East End, which is the poorer part of London, where there are major regeneration projects. But each of these areas, the aim is to redevelopment. A lot of them are industrial land, what we call brownfield land, and they will be redeveloped to create higher density environments. And one of the key ways that we're increasing density is building taller. And that is a key issue at the moment in London. There are some 240 new towers proposed for the centre of London at the moment. This is something which the general public were not aware of, but we've just had an exhibition at the New London Architecture to illustrate where those towers are going to be. And this has caused a certain amount of debate in London as to whether we have the right planning system to control the pressures that we have to densify, pressures which are increased by the fact that we have a large number of overseas investors at the moment from Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia, who are investing in residential development in London and are keen to build taller buildings. So the way that at the moment the planning system works in order to control tall buildings, these are being developed in what we call clusters, a whole series of clusters around different parts of the city, generally ones that already have some tall buildings. And those clusters happen within specific areas of the city. This map here is the River Thames. And these points are higher points that look down onto the city. And these are viewing corridors of St. Paul's Cathedral here and the Houses of Parliament here. So you're not allowed to build any tall buildings within these zones because they will get in the way of views of those particular buildings. So that means that you can only build tall buildings in these other areas around here. Now, London's planning is complicated by the fact that we have 34 boroughs, not too different to here, and those boroughs will make their own plans, but the mayor has a strategic view to oversee the whole of London. So this is the view of St. Paul's Cathedral from one of the hills looking down onto London. And so nobody is allowed to build a tall building within this zone in case they would obstruct that view. And also silhouettes of significant buildings are protected, and this is a page from the guidance that architects are given about where they can locate tall buildings. And so you're not allowed to build a tall building which would come up behind the Houses of Parliament, for instance. And since this is a World Heritage Site, it's not just the Mayor of London who has a role in this, but also UNESCO are quite keen to ensure that the area is not impacted by tall buildings. So this is what is happening at the moment in London. These are commercial buildings in the commercial centre of London. Here is St. Paul's Cathedral, and this is a view from Waterloo Bridge. So this view is protected. You can't build any tall buildings in this area, but next door you can build much taller buildings here. So this is a building. All these new buildings have nicknames. And this is called the Walkie-Talkie. This is by Rafael Vignoli, Uruguayan New York architect. This is called the Cheese Grater by Richard Rogers. And this is the Helter Skelter by KPF. And these are designed in a cluster altogether. And so the current London plan disapproves of sole buildings which will be located on their own without neighbours. So nobody is quite sure why this building got permission in this particular location, because it is outside the particular cluster. So here's a close-up of these buildings. This is Norman Foster's 30 St Mary Axe building, and that is nicknamed the Gherkin. And this is completed. This one is just about to be completed, and these two are awaiting tenants, and this was completed a few years ago. And also nearing completion, this is by Richard Rogers. This is the Leadenhall building, as I say, nicknamed the cheese grater because it is a shape of a cheese grater here. And the reason why this is this shape is because it tips backwards in order so that views of St. Paul's Cathedral dome don't touch the edge of the building. And at ground level, there is a 6-floor atrium, which will be a totally public space underneath. And public space is a key issue in terms of how we improve the quality of life in London, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. This is Canary Wharf, which is a commercial area to the east side of the centre of London. And this reflects a very different type of planning, I would say non-pragmatic planning, where this is on a formal grid plan, and the architecture is very different. It's much more North American. It is not the same as much of the rest of the development we've just been looking at in terms of its character and its reflection of London's informal methods of planning. As we move along the river, this is an opportunity area set out by the Mayor of London, which was up until 4 years ago was an industrial area with low-rise commercial sheds, and this is now being redeveloped with high-density housing, the highest density housing in the centre of London. And these are generally here around 8 to 14 floors high. This is the American Embassy, which is relocating to the site, and then a cluster of tall buildings going up to 65 floors. So these tall buildings are being kept within this particular area around a building that has already been completed here. And on that site this is an old power station, Battersea Power Station, which is going to be refurbished. It's a major London landmark, but it'll be refurbished to create a shopping centre with residential on the top, and then a series of residential buildings around it. Again, master planned by Raphael Vignoli, but with buildings by here Frank Gehry and Norman Foster. And this is an aerial view of the proposed master plan. The American Embassy is just in here, and here are the towers being grouped at one end with a lower series of buildings which go down towards the power station at the west end here. And this is what it will look like by the river. This is a series of buildings by Richard Rogers, and here again this is the new American Embassy, which should be completed there by 2018. And to the east of London now we're redeveloping the area around the Olympics. This is the Olympic Stadium here. And one of the main reasons why London wanted to get the Olympics was to create investment into the east end of London, which used to be the Docklands area and was a major manufacturing area until all the manufacturing moved to China. And so there was a lot of unemployment and a need for investment in infrastructure. So this is the central zone with Canary Wharf. Over here is the tall building cluster I just showed. But this is the Olympic Park, which is now being created into a public park. The first phases are just opening now, some 2 years after the Olympics. This is the Olympic Village, which has been refurbished so that now it's residential flats which will be rented out. And then there is new development taking place on some of the other areas of the Olympic Park, and redeveloped by the Mayor of London, with the main reason being that the investment in those residential developments will actually help pay off the Olympic debt. And this is the cycling velodrome with a whole series of cycling amenities just in this section. As you heard in the introduction, I'm a very keen cyclist, and I'll be talking a little bit more in a moment about cycling in cities. Public space is also a key part of a greener city, because we're doing as much as possible to create active transportation systems where walking, cycling and public transport create the main way of people getting around cities. And if people are going to get around cities on foot, then you need to create better spaces for them to use, to be able to sit out and to enjoy the city. So many areas of London are being gradually refurbished with nicer spaces, less traffic. Again, something which is happening in areas of Istanbul, indeed cities around the world, largely influenced by the work of the Danish architect Jan Gehl, who's really been the person who has been the driver of creating more livable cities. And I show this as a picture. This was the London Festival of Architecture just 10 years ago, and I'm director of the Festival of Architecture. And this is normally a 4-lane road, and what we did was we just covered it with grass, with turf, and it was amazing to see how you can change overnight a piece of street into a park, and the way that people use it totally changes, and it changes the character of the city. So putting more green into cities and putting more green into London is a key part of future strategies. And that relates to the changing way that in London we're starting to look at our streets and roads. And this is a part of a chart which looks at busy arterial roads and high roads here, down to city places and town squares. Here you have a lot of traffic going fast. Here you have areas of mixing traffic and people, and here you have pedestrian areas. And it's creating a organized hierarchy of these various uses, which is very important in terms of creating that livable city which Jan Gehl talks about. So the chart here, again, the busy roads here, the city places here, and the various streets in between, which all need to be treated in different ways and provide different amenities to citizens. So using the same chart there, up at the top you have the larger roads with more traffic that will travel at maybe 30 miles an hour, 50 kilometers per hour, down to, at this side, you have public squares which are just for pedestrians. And as you go through the chart, then the cars and vehicles reduce their speed to allow more mixing of the modes of transportation. And that's a significant change for us in London, because previously Transport for London, who have written this report and who oversee all transport in the capital, they always saw roads as places for vehicles to go as fast as they possibly could. Now we realize, and they have accepted, that streets are public spaces and need to be looked at in this hierarchical way to improve the quality of life in busy, dense city areas. And cycling is something which is now increasing in London, but we still have a long way to go to improve our infrastructure. And so you have this relationship of cyclists and vehicles, which is seen by many as being too dangerous to cycle. More people would cycle if they felt it was safer, and safety is the main disincentive for more people taking up greener ways of getting themselves into work by bike. That being said, our bike hire system has been very successful, as it has been in many other cities now, in Paris, in New York, and there are now 11,000 bicycles for hire in regular use in London, and this is a system which has really changed the way people see streets. It's changed the way that drivers relate to cyclists, and is a key part in creating a greener transport system within the city. And the key part of that, I think most cities don't only promote cycling because they want to encourage more cyclists. They promote cycling because it is greener, cleaner, quieter, but also it's healthier. And so this is a report which was produced initially by Mayor Bloomberg in New York with the American Institute of Architects, New York's chapter. They produced a report on active design guidelines which shows how buildings can be improved to create healthier occupants, but also how that fits into wider city planning. And I'm on the board of the Active Design Guidelines Centre, and we're now promoting this for London, because it's a key thing we need to do to create healthier citizens. At the moment, citizens are becoming less healthy, and these are just some statistics from London. This is 21% of children now in the UK play out of doors, whereas their parents, 71%, used to play out of doors. More figures that 68% of men and 58% of women in England are overweight. $960 billion is the cost, if the current rate of obesity continues, to healthcare costs in the US. So we're seeing major problems of obesity and diabetes too in many of the developed economies that really needs to be dealt with by creating healthier cities, cities where people move around themselves more rather than in cars or without any sort of physical exertion. So these are elements that are being built into planning of buildings, and building regulations are being changed to deal with that. And so in New York, you have buildings which are already making stairs a much more positive element within the design of buildings. In so many office buildings we find in London that the core hides the stairs. You can't find it even if you wanted to, and everybody is just directed to use the lifts. The idea that people should actually use stairs on a more regular basis, key part of keeping people active, but also of course cycling is probably the healthiest way for people to get around. And in London, the mayor has been developing a series of what are called cycle superhighways, which are generally, not always, but more of them are happening to be protected from the traffic and provide reasonably safe routes for cyclists to get into the centre. Because of London having similar scale to a city here, that people do commute quite a long way, and therefore they need to have places that they can cycle as safely as possible, with safe junctions and protection from traffic. But actually the general experience of the cyclist in London is more like this, which, if they're lucky, which is less safe and less protected. But the mayor has money to spend on improving conditions, and that hopefully will stop the emergence of these bikes. These are white bikes which are placed whenever a cyclist is killed. And one of the projects that I'm involved with is to the construction industry cycling commission has been set up in order to create greater safety both in the construction process, in that where there are cycling deaths in London, some 75% of the heavy vehicles that kill cyclists are construction vehicles. So construction industry has a responsibility to make sure that its lorries are much safer. But also the construction industry, the architects, the planners and the developers, these are the people, we are the people who actually create cities, and we need to make sure that when we create cities we build in accessible streets for everybody, what the Americans call complete streets, and streets that respond to creating more livable cities. And so at the moment the Mayor of London has some £1 billion to spend on improving infrastructure for cycling in London, and this requires what the Americans, I think, very properly call road dieting, reducing the fatness of roads, reducing the obesity of roads to create safe facilities for cycling. And this is a route which goes alongside the Thames, which is here, improving the facilities for cycling and improving the quality of life for Londoners generally. And this is Boris Johnson, our mayor, who is a cyclist. Last year I cycled across America and across England, 6,000 kilometers, studying what American cities were doing to improve cycling and cycling infrastructure. And one of the key issues in terms of creating more livable cities is political leadership. In all the cities went to, it's convincing mayors that this is the right thing to do. This is the sort of thing that creates better cities, more livable cities, and better places. And as you can see, Boris Johnson himself is a cyclist, so I'm very pleased to say that he's instituting very positive policies to do that. And I know that here it's very hilly in Istanbul, so maybe not so easy to put in quite so many cycle routes, but walking and public transport, active transportation, key part of making better and more sustainable cities. Thank you very much.
We'll take the questions in the coffee break.
No questions.
We have, pardon. Şimdi kahve arasına geçeceğiz ama hani bir dakika herkesin duymasını istediğimiz sorular varsa kahve arasında konuşmacımıza çevresinde dolanmak yerine yeşil notun rengimiz şeffaf dedik. Zamanımızda yönetmemiz de lazım ama bazı soruları kendisinden cevaplarıyla dinleyerek almak isteriz. Dolayısıyla sorusu olan izleyicilerimiz var mı? Bir danışmak istiyorum. Evet, şurada var. Ama çok kısa olacak, şimdiden söyleyeyim.
Abdullah Baysal. Abdullah Baysal, son 10 yılda Londra'da plan tadili, ne kadar plan tadili yapıldı? Kentleşme adına plan tadili ne kadar yapıldı? Sorun bu. Son 10 yılda. Son 10 yılda Londra'da plan değişikliği ne kadar yapıldı?
I'm not getting anything in here.
She is asking what has been the change of planning in the last 10 years, how you can measure that.
What sort of planning?
He's asking the change of planning in the last 10 years.
In the shape of this, yes. What has changed in the last 10 years is largely that we now Right. Yes, we now have an elected mayor, which we didn't have before. The elected mayor creates the London Plan. The London Plan sets out what will happen in London now up until 2036, and the key issues to do with that are, as I was saying, creating a denser city, but also one that responds to growth. That means that we have to build more housing, we have to build more infrastructure, so we're building at the moment one large underground line called Crossrail, which goes right from east-west across London. We're investing in buses and, as I said, also in cycling and walking infrastructure. So the key changes that have happened in the last 10 years is that London in the post-war period lost quite a lot of population, and then in the early 90s started to pick up. So our key issue is really trying to plan for growth, increasing use of public transport, developing areas of higher density development next to places which have good public transport infrastructure, and in general within the centre of the city reducing the number of motor cars and increasing the provision of public transport, either via the bus system or by improving the metro system underground. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you, Peter. Well, thank you very much. At the moment, people are a little hungry, so let's have a coffee break, huh?